First, I want to begin by telling you that the events you are about to read are not fiction. They are not the ramblings of a terrorized teenager seeing ghosts, feeling he's being watched, or hearing noises at night. They are recollections of what has been happening for the last 10 years to a previously lauded professional in his field, finance, and who has now been on the run, never staying more than a week in a single place, and that has lost everything that once was dear to him. When this all started, I was 25, enjoying a successful career and a great life. I had a great job, had plenty of friends, even though just a few close ones. And I was enjoying stability in my life. The only problem at this point was I moved to a different city, getting away from my normal group of friends with whom I used to play all kinds of games. I should tell you that even though I would be labeled as a jock during high school and college, I loved board games. So moving away from that group of friends prevented me from continuing my passion for these games. That was until I met Devon. After a few years living in this new city, I grew impatient of not being able to play D&D with a group of friends the way I used to do back in my hometown, so I decided to look for a group in here. My first try was to head to the local comic book store, who also sold board games, and that's where I first met him. He was nothing like what you would expect a geek to be. He was not living on his mother's basement. He was rather good-looking and successful in his own career, and there was an air of pedantism to him. But when I introduced myself to him and my intentions to find a group to play with, he gave me a quick grin and offered me a seat. "You are in luck, Rick. My group just has an opening for a new player. It's yours if you want it," he said as he wrote down some things on a piece of paper he had in front of him. You can imagine how excited I was about this, so without giving it a second thought, I decided to try his group. "Of course, that sounds awesome. Just tell me when and where, and I'll be there," I told him. Devon handed me the piece of paper he had been writing on, and I was surprised at what he had written. It looked like some sort of contract, which I had never seen a DM do before, but I chalked it up to role-playing, as, at this moment, Devon had turned it on and was acting as any dungeon master would be. I don't remember the exact words he wrote, as I didn't pay much attention to it, but I will try to paraphrase as best as I can. I solemnly swear to adhere to role-play standards expect from the Dungeon Master, Devon, and play in character at all times while the game is running. My class of choice will be, and my character name is. From this moment forward, the has been born, and with him our souls are entwined until the Dungeon Master's story has ended, or I have been killed. The empty spaces were left for my character name and class, and I know my choice of a paladin would anger most players I have ever played with, so get over it. I filled the form on and noticed that at the very end of the document, written in a language I did not know, were 3 more lines. Kind of like a footnote, and at the time I simply thought Devon was being cute with his dungeon mastering abilities, which made me excited that someone would put this much effort into it. The next couple of days have to be some of the strangest days I have ever had. On my way to work, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. During parts of my journey, I would be passing a car and feel a strong disgust towards its driver, and as soon as I was out of its range, the feeling passed, and this feeling continued to appear at random times during the day, and I could not understand what was going on. I tried brushing it aside as some sort of bug or illness, and simply looked forward to the weekend when I would take part in my first Dungeons and Dragons game in The day finally came when I was supposed to head to the place we would be playing, and as I drove there, that feeling of disgust began to increase. The closer I got to Devon's house, the stronger my stomach turned, and a ridiculous fear surrounded me. As I pulled over to Devon's house, there was nothing else I wanted to do but run away from there, get as far away as I could. But I didn't know why. My stomach turned and I vomited right on the street, completely confused as to what was going on. I had not been sick the entire week, and I hadn't felt anything wrong before arriving. Devon came out to greet me and assured me it was fine. He handed me a clear drink. I thought it was water, but as I drank it, I could taste the sweetness of the liquid cover my mouth and throat. It helped my stomach and allowed my senses to see the huge house Devon had. It was impressive and beautiful. The floor was polished wood, and portraits of his family hung on every wall. He was proud on explaining to us about how the male side of his family had most of them been war heroes. Oh yes, I haven't said who the rest of the guys were. I got introduced to them, I'll try to describe them as best as I can. Daniel. He looked a little bit short, maybe 5'4" or 5'3", and rather bulky. He wasn't fat and looked rather strong. Strangely enough, he was playing a dwarf fighter in the game, and he certainly looked like one. He was a red-headed young guy, probably 20 or 21, and he was letting his beard grow as a way to get into his character, I'm guessing. Jordan. He was slim, blonde. His face was long, and you could see he worked out. He had a friendly vibe to him, and here was really not much more I could tell from him. He was playing an elven ranger, which again I thought fitted him strangely well. Diana. I have to tell you, this chick was gorgeous. She was around 5'7", slim. Her long brown hair reached the lower part of her back. She had bright green eyes and silky white skin. She was curvy, enticing. I could not take my eyes off her for quite a while. She was playing a human cleric. Harold. This guy. The moment I met him, my stomach turned again. I managed to keep myself from puking, but something was making me detest him. He was friendly, though, gave me a grin and a handshake, but as soon as I touched his hand, my body shook, and those feelings grew. I stepped back a bit, and the group laughed a bit. Come on, let's get on with it, Devon said as he led us down to his basement, a ridiculous, enormous room that could house all 6 of us if need be. The room was dimly lit and all kinds of D&D artifacts or decorations were laid around. Come on, sit and let's begin, Devon asked us as we sat around a huge table in one of the far corners of the room. As soon as we sat down, Devon chanted, something I could not understand. The rest responded with something I could only understand as Grea-Ree. They looked at me and asked me to repeat. It's pronounced Grea-Ree, Diana said in a sweet voice, looking at me with a smile that could melt me if she tried. Grea-Ree, I said. The room got darker for a second, and I felt my body change. It wasn't painful, but I got a bit bulkier than I was. When I looked at Devon, he was no longer wearing his suit, but a long, leather-brown cloak. His eyes were a bright red, and he had a raspy, deep voice. Diana, Harold, Jordan, and Daniel looked excited, but I was terrified. That was the day my life changed, and ever since then. For the moment, I have to leave as I have been in here for close to a week now. They must not be too far behind, and I can't let them catch me. I'll update whenever I'm safe again. Since this began, I have slowly eaten up the money I had made during my youth and the inheritance I had received from my grandparents. I cannot say I enjoyed it to the fullest, as most of my money went to make sure I had safe houses wherever I had to run away to. Fake IDs and other items became a necessity for me, and paying off people to get as far away from me as they could after interacting with me was a normal occurrence. At the moment, I'm on one of those safe houses I purchased. It won't be safe for long, but I'll be here long enough to let you see another entry on the list of my memories about this event. After my acceptance and the sudden darkening of the room, I couldn't feel but that something terrible was happening. My newly found companions, however, seemed to be as excited as ever. They didn't flinch. They didn't wonder about what was going on. Instead, I could see a wide, bright smile on Diana's face, a determined look on Jordan and Daniel. And Harold, the moment I saw him on that lightly illuminated room with that mocking grin on his face, I knew he couldn't be trusted. "Isn't this incredibly exciting?" Diana asked me. She noticed I was less than excited and let out a small giggle. Her soft, warm hand took one of mine and squeezed it in a reassuring way. Her green eyes stared into mine, and she shook her head for a moment. "Don't worry, Devin is just this good. He has light controls under the table on his side, so he's able to set the perfect mood for our session," she said. And I won't lie, those reassuring words calmed me down a bit, but I was still not comfortable. Devin and Harold still made me feel uneasy. But knowing he was controlling the lighting in the room did dissipate a bit of whatever I thought was going on. Well now, during our last session we lost Micah in the infiltration mission. The kingdom of Kaylee is still under siege of the Seven Demons army, and Kaylee's information network hasn't found out any way to step them. Devin explained, and I realized why they had an opening. Micah had been killed on the session, and I assumed, wrongly so, but we will get into that later, that he had not returned to the group because he had been mad at this event. We need to flank them. Take a small group of Kaylee's knights along with some artillery and flank them. That will reduce their numbers greatly, Daniel said in his raspy, deep voice. The rest of the group sounded excited. Diana and Jared agreed. "It is a great plan. I think I should go ahead alone and scout. My points in stealth will probably help me get close to their army, and I can report back if we need to do something different." Harold intervened, and my new friends agreed, however. I didn't buy any of what he was saying. There was something about him that just didn't feel right, and his justification to going ahead alone didn't make sense to me. The densest part of the demon army was right at the front gates, and only a few groups were holding the siege around the castle. A quick group could have disposed of them if they were not so direly needed in the front. "I don't think that's a great idea, Harold." The moment I said that, he looked at me the worst anyone has ever looked at me before. I could feel his eyes digging a dagger through my heart, and feelings of despise coming from him. Diana and the rest seemed surprised at my response, and Devin's look certainly didn't help. He was smirking, but he looked mad at what I had said. "Don't get me wrong, your intel would be valuable, but we don't have the time for it. I say we brute force it against the East Battalion putting a siege on the city. We are more than capable of defeating it swiftly, Taz. Then we can flank them, and we will have gotten rid of a strategic siege and aided the army push them back. My idea was received well by everyone except Harold. He scuffed and crossed his arms, but ultimately agreed on doing as I said. Diana looked at me and smiled, reassuring me that for my first time in their group, I had shown a little bit of leadership and smarts. A rush of happiness and excitement filled me for that moment, and the feelings of fear I had before got pushed aside. As soon as we got to the east gate, we could hear the grunts of the demon army on the other side. I was certain we could beat them, as the sounds were incredibly reduced to those at the front gates. I had been able to talk my idea through a group of 3 knights that were aiding us. 2 of them pushing down a catapult towards the gate, and 1 riding on his horse, spear in hand, ready for battle. "Let me climb up there and see how many of these things we will have to fight," Harold suggested as he started to climb up the wall towards the top. I stopped him, however, as once again I did not feel right on letting him go alone there. He seemed mad once more, but I was getting used to him looking at me in that way. "No, we have to storm them down, remember? Timing is essential right now," I said. The knights instructed us to a side entrance to the east gate. The catapult would have to stay behind the gate, as it would not fit through that side entrance, and we were fine about it. We rushed outside, and all the confidence I had vanished in a second. As soon as we were within sight of the battalion, my heart shrank. I got nauseated, and I could feel all the terrible, terrible things these monsters had done. My mind started playing tricks on me, as it started flashing and showing me images of the kingdom of Kaylee. It was like I was actually there. In front of me, these disgusting, short and fat monsters, with long nails like claws and sharpened teeth like fangs. Their eyes were all white with a yellowish hint to them, and they shrieked at the sight of us. I felt extremely dizzy and slow, and the muffled screams of my companions could not get me off my daze. "Rick, snap out of it!" Diana shouted at me and slapped my face. The pain shoot through my entire body, and as I blinked, I realized I was in the battlefield. I could smell the rotting scent of corpses around the east gate. Whatever these things were had a stench that would have made anyone vomit. It was worse than anything I had smelled on the real world. I was in a state of shock as just moments before I had been sitting at a table on Devon's basement, and now I was outside, watching how a horde of monsters tried to sink their claws on the flesh of my companions. "We need help, Rick," Daniel shouted as one of the creature's claws stabbed his side. He let out a scream of pain, but didn't hesitate to bring down the axe he was now holding over the creature's neck. As soon as that happened, Daniel rolled backwards as fast as he could. The monster busted in a pool of a greenish liquid that quickly burnt the dead grass below it. "Do something, you fucking moron!" Harold shouted while slicing another of these monsters with his thin sword. I was finally able to react, and after what felt like a few minutes, we had cleared the east side of these things. The doors opened and the catapult came out. My vision flashed once more, and I was once again sitting at the table with the rest of the guys in there. Devon had a smile on his face, a wickedly large smile, and I couldn't help it. I freaked out. "What the fuck was that?" I said as I stood up from my chair. Diana, Jared, and Daniel looked at me a bit worried. Devon kept that smirk, and Harold laughed. "This guy is a pussy, Devon. Why did you brought him?" Harold said as he laughed. "He has what it takes, and he wanted an experience. Didn't you, Rick?" Devon asked, as well-spoken as ever, but I was incredibly furious. I don't know what you gave me, but I'm the fuck out of here, I said as I stormed out of the basement. As I left, I could hear Devon, though, as clear as day, as if I was still right in front of him. You signed a contract, remember, until the DM's story has ended or I have been killed. I didn't pay attention to it at all. I was getting the fuck out of there and never coming back. What I did not know was that was not a choice that was mine to make. Story. So I'm in some random Starbucks in the middle of downtown Las Vegas, typing this out for reasons that are beyond me. I guess that if I die, I want at least someone to know what happened to me. You're probably getting the impression that I am scared for my life, but you would be completely wrong. In fact, I'm having the most fun I've ever had. This is by far the best game I've ever played. Now, enough of my babbling. Let me indulge you on why I hired a hitman on myself. So it all started about 4 weeks ago. I'm sitting in my office, bored as all hell, staring blankly into my computer, counting each individual white pixel on that goddamn screen. As I'm staring off into space, enjoying the peace and quiet of my own little world, I start thinking to myself, how did I end up this way? My life has boiled down to me sitting in this fucking cubicle for 8 hours a day, eating and sleeping. I sure as hell didn't grow up thinking, boy, I'd sure like to spend the rest of my life filing acquisitions for some soul-draining corporation. I mean, I make good money, sure, but I don't even feel human anymore. It's like I'm just going through the motions. I have no kids, no girlfriend, no family that actually want anything to do with me. I'm completely alone. I need some adventure in my life again. Some excitement. Fuck anything is better than what I'm doing right now. I was snapped out of thinking how pathetic my life was by my annoying ass boss asking me if I had finished with this week's paperwork. I hadn't yet, but I lied and told him I did. He told me in his "I'm superior to you" tone to have it on his desk tomorrow morning. Yeah, I'll get right on that, you self-centered prick. I finished up with the form I had been working on and turned off my computer. It was 5 p.m., signaling the end of another meaningless day. I got home and started thinking about what I could do to make life a bit more fun. I went through the usual ideas of a vacation, moving to a new city, maybe even a new car. Yet they all fell short. I needed something really fucking crazy to go down. I wanted to drop a bomb on my former life and really get shit started. I started fucking around on the deep web, looking at all the illegal shit that they have to offer. And then I saw an ad that said, "Have a problem in your life? Hire one of our cleaners to take care of it at Cthulhu's Resume." Now my interest was piqued. I checked out their website, and it was a site to hire a hitman. Then a thought popped into my head. What if I hired a hitman on myself? It would be like a game of cat and mouse, and the punishment for getting caught would be, of course, death. I was curious to see what their guidelines were and to see how far they would go to eliminate a target. So I emailed them saying I had a problem I wanted to get rid of. Within 3 hours, I got a response back, informing me of all the details of the business and the range of prices it would cost me. I didn't respond right away, allowing myself time to think carefully of what I would be getting myself into. The more I thought about it, the more excited I got. This was the ultimate adventure game, like a real-life video game. I would have someone that would spend night and day hunting me down, and I would have to spend all my time hunting them down. The first person to find the other wins, and the loser dies. It was perfect. So I went into work the next day knowing that it would be my last day there. I did what every cubicle monkey dreams of doing. I told my boss that he can go fuck himself, told the smoking hot receptionist that I wanted to bend her over her desk and fuck her brains out, and destroyed every last form and file I had in that shithole prison, just to make things harder for all the douchebags I worked with. Then I got to work on setting everything up. I went out and bought myself some new toys at the local gun store. Bought myself a new 9mm Glock, a PS-90 assault rifle, and my crown jewel, a Barrett 50 cal sniper rifle. I also stopped by this nifty little spy store in my city and picked up a few things. A few objects with discrete cameras in them that allowed me to watch them through my phone, bug detectors, and a voice changer. I then took 30,000 from my savings account and converted it into bitcoins. After all that was completed, I contacted the man who had first emailed me and gave him all of my info and told him that this man would be very hard to catch as he travels a lot and that he may be armed. I told him that I didn't want just one of their regular cleaners on this job. I wanted the best they had to offer. Shortly after sending the email, I received a message back informing that they would send one of the best, but it would cost a bit more. He also said that as soon as I sent the payment, they would get started. The last line of the email he sent me made me realize shit was going to get serious very quickly. Just a quick warning for you. Once the payment is sent and confirmed, there is no going back. The job will be taken care of, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. Perfect. I sent the payment immediately and got a confirmation email back that it was received and that someone would be sent out the next day to my location. Now the real fun can begin. So there's the start to the huge shit show I created for myself. And like I said, it's been loads of fun. I've been in this Starbucks for about 2 hours now, and I need to get going as I can't stay in one location for too long. I'll update tomorrow with the rest of my story so far if people are interested. Wish me luck. I need to clear some stuff up with you guys before I get into my story. First off, a lot of you have been doubting the fact that I got a 50 cal Barrett sniper rifle without a waiting period. The reason I was able to obtain it too easily was because the state I bought the gun in is a very lenient state as far as gun policies. And on top of that, the owner of the store was my neighbor. And he knew that I had wanted one for the longest time, as I have an interest in long-range shooting. So all I had to do was get a simple background check and fill out a good amount of paperwork, and it was mine. Secondly, a few of you are saying stuff like, "You're not going to last a week." If you had read even the first 2 paragraphs of my first entry, you would have known that this has been going on for about 4 weeks now. I've had a few encounters with the man, and I'm hoping to finish this up in the next few days. Anyways, let's continue. So I had just gotten confirmation that my payment was received and someone would be sent out the next day. I started packing all the belongings in my apartment that I would need, as I wouldn't be able to return until after this was all completed. I packed about a month's worth of clothes, all my electronics that I would need, all my guns and spy gear that I had bought myself, and a few other miscellaneous items like toothbrush and shampoo. Once everything was packed up, I went over to a friend's house that had an older car for sale that was registered to his name. I asked him if I could trade him cars for reasons I couldn't get into, and gave him $2,000 to just keep my car in his backyard and look after it. I figured if this hitman agency was any good, they'd look up my DMV records and know what kind of car I was driving and my license plate, which would make me a lot easier to find. He agreed and told me to look after myself and to be careful. So I set out back to my old apartment that night to put all of the things I had packed up into the trunk and back seat. I also set out a little note on my coffee table in the living room that said, "Tag you're it just to fuck with the guy and to give him a little heads up that this wasn't going to be an average hit." What fun would it be if he didn't even know that this was a fun little game? I now had everything I needed to go on the hunt and a car that couldn't be traced back to me. Before the day ended, I went to Walmart and picked myself up a prepaid smartphone, and then dismantled my old phone so I couldn't be tracked via GPS. Before it got too late, I also stopped by the little spy shop again and picked up a magnetic GPS locator. You know, the kind that Walt and Hank from Breaking Bad put under Gus Fring's car to follow him. After that, I was fully ready to do this. No turning back now. I went back to the area around my apartment around 11 p.m. and parked about 2/3 of a mile away to wait. No way I could stay the night there and allow that guy to get the drop on me while I was sleeping. I sat on the passenger side of the car to make it look like I was waiting for a friend to come back to the car and to not freak the people out who lived in the apartments I was in front of. They said they'd be sending him out the next day, so I had to sleep in the car and wait for him to arrive. I went to sleep around midnight and woke around 7 a.m. I took out my nice deer hunting binoculars and waited, and waited, and waited. I finally got hungry enough to convince myself I needed to eat, so I went to a little fast food joint and picked up a few burgers. I went back and parked in the same spot I was before. It was around 5 p.m. at this time, and I figured this guy wasn't going to come during the day, so I fucked around on Reddit for a few hours until it got dark. I finally got bored of Reddit, so I went back to watching my apartment. Around 10 p.m., I watched an all-black car with dark-tinted windows. I think it was a Chrysler 300, pulled up a few hundred feet from my apartment on the other side of the street. It looked a bit fishy on account of that it had out-of-state plates, and I'd never seen it in my neighborhood before, so I started to watch it. It just sat there for about 10 minutes, presumably checking out my house. Then it drove away. Huh. Well, that was weird, I thought to myself as I had the biggest grin on my face. I knew that was my guy. I tried to sleep that night and maybe got a few hours in around 1 o'clock, but I was so excited with anticipation that I couldn't get a full night's rest. I woke up around 3:30 a.m. to check everything out, so I started fucking around on Reddit again to pass the time. Around 4 a.m., the same black car pulled up in the same spot it was before. About 2-3 minutes of waiting there, the lights shut off, and a man got out. He was a bigger guy around my height, 6'0", but way bigger muscle-wise. Dude could definitely beat the shit out of me in close quarters combat, so I knew I couldn't let that happen. The guy was also dressed really nice in a suit. What a fucking stereotypical hitman, I thought to myself. I noticed I had the biggest grin on my face again. I felt so alive. The man walked across the street and sure enough went up to my apartment. He took a key out his pocket, put it in the lock, and slammed on it with this small metal brick thing. I knew it was a bump key. He then entered my apartment and shut the door behind him. About 30 seconds after he did that, I used the binoculars to focus in on his license plates and wrote down the number. After about 5 minutes, he came out and put something in his pocket. I'm pretty sure it was his gun. He also had something else crumpled up in his other hand. He threw it in the gutter, got back in his car, and drove off. I waited about an hour and went to go see what he threw out. Sure enough, it was the "Tag You're It" note I left him. I started laughing hysterically and knew this was going to be a lot more fun than I could ever hope for. I went back to my car to try and catch a few more hours of sleep. When I awoke, the sun was already up. It was around 8 a.m. I drove off to another one of my buddy's house who worked for the DMV to get some info from him. He wasn't there, so I went to his work to find him. After about 15 minutes, when he was in between helping people, I walked up to his counter. He was surprised to see me and greeted me with a, "What's up, man?" I sat down without saying anything to him and slipped him the piece of paper with the license plate number on it. "What's this?" he asked. I just looked at him and said, "Don't ask questions. I need the info of the person who these plates belong to." "Dude, I can't give that information to you. I could get into a lot of trouble." I pulled out about $200 bucks from my wallet and slipped it to him and said, "Please, dude, this is really important. This guy wants to kill me and I need this information. My life depends on it. Here's 200 bucks. I know you and your wife have been hurting for money." He looked at me with a really serious look and muttered under his breath, "Fuck, man." He took the money and put it into his pocket and started typing on his computer. He then got up from his chair and told me he'd be right back. About a minute later, he came back with a few sheets of paper. "This is everything I could get on the guy." I looked at him again with a really serious face and said, "Don't mention this to anyone, even your wife. This guy is really dangerous, and I don't need you getting involved, and make sure no one can trace back the fact that you looked up this information." He looked back at me and said, "Okay." As I was getting up to leave, he just said, "Take care of yourself, man, and be careful." I told him that I would and that I couldn't thank him enough. I walked back to my car and started studying the piece of paper, and once again had a huge grin on my face. I now had a bunch of this guy's info in my hands. I knew who I was dealing with. I'm not disclosing the man's name due to concerns for myself and his family, so we'll just refer to him as Mike. Mike was 35 years old and was registered to an address in Arizona, like I thought it was a black Chrysler 300. Now that I had the info I needed, it was time to stake out my house a bit more. When I got back, it was around 1 p.m., and I parked a bit further away this time. I sat in my car for about another hour, and when 2 p.m. rolled around, I saw the same black 300 roll up about 2 blocks away from my place again. Further away than the last time, but close enough to watch the place thoroughly. I was only about a mile away from him, and he didn't even know it. So the Burger King I'm in is pretty much dead now, and I've been here for quite a while. I need to get back to my hotel and start planning some stuff. I'll try to post tomorrow when I get a bit of free time around 5 or 6 p.m. Until next time, no sleep. Until next time. Story 3. I'm sure at least some people will be able to relate to this. My childhood was odd. At the time, I couldn't see that there was anything wrong with it. I couldn't understand it when things happened that weren't normal. I went to school, had friends, and played games like any other kid. I had loving parents and an annoying sister, just like many other kids my age did. My grandparents, aunts, and uncles would often visit. I didn't like when my grandmother came. She was a strict woman, and honestly, she scared me. I can remember vividly one summer she came over. She looked my sister and I up and down, then turned to my father and asked, "What about the other one? I thought you said get it over with and end this farce." He pulled her aside and told my sister and I to go play outside. She left that night and never came to visit again. There were so many things that I never learned should be questioned. I never comprehended that they were something I should question. Most of them felt small at the time. We had a picture of our family tree in our hallway, a long line of sibling pairs as far back as anyone remembered, and yet by each of them was space for a third. My mother would bring in extra groceries every trip and sometimes set an extra plate at dinner, then quietly put it away again. But there was one rule that we were never to break. We weren't allowed to speak at home. Rather, we weren't allowed to raise our voices above a whisper. Whether in anger, laughter, or even by accident, loudness in general was treated as taboo as soon as we set foot on the driveway. On the few occasions we raised our voices, our father's anger always fell hardest on me. My sister cried, but she was spared. I didn't understand why my mother never comforted either of us until much later, and it cost me far more than I would have been willing to trade. I really want to emphasize that this was always the norm to me. I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't know I should be worried or scared. Despite this, like I mentioned earlier, I did have a good childhood. My parents truly loved us both, and it was rare that we got into trouble. I had a lot of friends at school, and I'd often spend the majority of my day at one of their houses, playing PS2 or taking advantage of their trampoline, which I had always been envious of. My dad didn't like it. Any time I wanted to get permission for a play date or a sleepover, I would ask my mom. This would be followed by tense, coarse whispers between the two of them in their room. Sometimes they'd let me, other times not. Hindsight truly is a taunting thing. I can't tell you how many nights I've spent laying awake, wishing my dad had won those hushed arguments. I wish to myself as I toss and turn that I hadn't been born to my parents, that I hadn't been born at all. But even more vicious than hindsight is the past itself. It stands with absolute resoluteness. It is unchangeable and unforgettable. A wound that never heals until the day the afflicted passes away. Siblings are supposed to be mean to each other when they're young. It's part of how they grow up, how they learn social skills. So when my friends suggested that we scare my sister during a sleepover, I was immediately on board. I wasn't allowed to have friends over at our house, but I told them I could record it all and show them the next day. I was beyond excited to have something to rub in my sister's face. She was the eldest, and I wanted to get the upper hand on her for once. As any little girl would, she screamed when she saw the rubber snake under her pillow. It wasn't a long scream. She covered her mouth with her hands almost as soon as it left her lips. But it was enough. There was a moment of silence right after she screamed that felt never-ending. Then my parents ran into the room. They saw her, mouth still covered and eyes wide with terror, then the toy snake on her bed. My father cursed under his breath before scooping up my sister into his arms. My mother looked like she was going to cry. Her eyes darted down even before the noises began. Scratching. Something was scratching the wooden floor underneath our feet. Light at first, soft, almost as if it was asking to be let in politely. Then louder, louder and louder until it was violently clawing away the wood like tissue paper. The boards bent first, bowing upward as if the house itself were breathing. Then they split, splinters flying, and something began to crawl through. When my father saw what had emerged from below our feet, he set my sister down and stepped away. All he said was, "I'm sorry." He didn't sound angry and he didn't sound afraid, just tired, like he'd been waiting for this, as if he had expected it. It was small. We had raccoons in our backyard that my sister and I would try to catch. At that moment, that's the only size comparison that I could think of. It crawled on its hands and knees, bloated and red as if its skin was being pulled taut over too much of its own body. A putrid, fleshy cord dangled over its shoulders, coiling around its neck before disappearing into its own swollen belly. How could something so sickly, so small, be so strong? Its eyes locked onto my sister, and I jumped between the two. My mother cried out, "No!" Before either of my parents could move, the rotten child seized my ankle and hurled me across the room as if I were a toy soldier. I hit the wall and my mom came to pick me up, both shielding and restraining me. But even if I had broken free, it wouldn't have mattered. In seconds, it had her. My sister's nails scraped across the floorboards, her muffled cry cut short as the thing dragged her into the hole below. I heard her scream again, but this time it wasn't her hands that silenced it. The sound of flesh being torn from sinew, ligaments snapping, bones breaking. Then her voice called again. "Mom! Dad!" It pulled itself back up from the darkness. The sight of it now forced me to vomit on the floor. It was bigger but wrong. Its arms and legs were uneven, its hands a clutter of mismatched fingers, as though it had been playing with bones the way a child plays with toys, jamming them into place, trying to look like my sister. Patches of her brown hair sprouted from swollen red skin, clumps of it slick with blood. Her white teeth were crammed into its gray gums, sharp and uneven, like butcher knives buried in raw meat. But worst of all were the eyes. They were her eyes. I could still see the fear they held only moments ago, the betrayal and terror she had experienced. My father scooped my sister up in his arms and carried her out of the room. I could hear her monstrous, joyful cries as she tried to use her new, stolen voice. The rest of my childhood was spent pretending the monster had always been my sister, pretending that her laugh was hers, that her smile was hers. I was punished more harshly for mistreating her than I ever was for breaking the rule of silence. I moved out when I turned 16 and continued my game of pretend. I pretended my childhood never happened, that I was a normal man with a normal past and a normal family. Only one thing brings me comfort now. No matter how much my parents beg and plead and yell and berate, I will never have children. This ends with me, and it ends with her. Story 4. My husband is a painter. Well, that's a stretch. He does very modern Jackson Pollock-style art. I've seen him in the studio, and he's not so much painting as he is flinging paint at the canvas with his bare hands. Strangely, though, people pay real money for his work. His most recent one, gray and blue splatters on a gray canvas entitled Ocean Dawn, fetched us a cool $3,000. He makes a full salary off his work and then some. I don't get it. Maybe the people who buy his work are smarter or more cultured than me. They all fit a very specific type: well-dressed men with distinguished salt and pepper hair, petite blonde wives that look like they've never eaten a slice of cake in their lives, money to burn, put on the dog types. Although if it's a choice between one of my husband's paintings and a Louis Vuitton purse, well, his paintings are marginally less ugly than those purses. Man, what is it with rich people and ugly stuff? Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. The reason why I'm writing this is because my husband has been away for the past 2 weeks visiting family. While he's been gone, I've been running the business by myself, and I've noticed some odd things. His studio is a really nice space downtown, large and full of light, filled ceiling to floor with his paintings, and even though they're individually ugly, there's something sort of beautiful about them being all together. The different colors and splattering types all match and coordinate with each other. It's obvious they're all done by the same artist. Maybe that's why he makes money off them. They have a distinct style. You can point to one and say, with certainty, that's a Theodore Waters painting. The thick globs of paint, the colors that don't really go with each other, that's a Waters right there. I could put on a smock and throw paint at a canvas while listening to Gregorian chants too, but I wouldn't be able to produce paintings that consistently resembled each other in style. The first few days went well. We had a minor hiccup. I almost gave the woman buying Evening Tranquility the wrong painting. They looked identical to me, but I was enjoying it. After work, I'd head to the studio for a few hours and binge dramas on Hulu, waiting for the next client to come by. Things took a turn for the worse, however, on Wednesday night. My iPad ran out of battery 20 minutes before the last client was supposed to show up, so I just sat there staring at the paintings. I got up and rearranged them a little. I pulled out the piece that was supposed to be sold tonight, Midnight Dream. It was one of the less ugly ones, if only for its color scheme. Black canvas, or possibly navy blue, splattered with purple, mauve, indigo, and white, and just a few dots of ocean blue drizzling across the front. I leaned it against the other paintings and sat back at the desk, taking off my glasses and rubbing my eyes. Damn allergies. When I looked back up, however, I froze. With my glasses off, Midnight Dream was now blurry, and with all the random splatters blurred now, I could see a clear shape. How there were less splatters, more darkness in the center of the canvas. That looked exactly like the silhouette of a person. A person leaned over the viewer, staring down at them. What the? I put my glasses back on. But with all the clear dots and drizzles and specks, I could only barely make out the image. Was that why people were buying Theodore's paintings? Because there was a second hidden image? It didn't make sense, though. I'd seen Theodore making some of these paintings. He was randomly flinging paint on a canvas, listening to those calming Gregorian chants or whatever they were. There was no way he could plan where the paint fell to create a second image. Unless he was somehow going back and painting over some of the paint splatters later, though I didn't see any brush strokes to imply that. I got up and pulled out another one of Theodore's paintings, entitled Pink Marble, splatters of pink and red and white. I leaned it against Midnight Dream, stepped back and took off my glasses. It was a hand covered in splatters of blood. My stomach did a little flip. I felt nauseous. It's just art, I told myself. People do extreme art all the time. What about that one where that giant guy is eating a man? That's like in an art museum and everything, right? Nothing wrong with painting a bloody hand. Nothing wrong with painting a shadow person glaring down at you. And maybe I was wrong. There wasn't much detail in these images, just the suggestion of forms. It could be pareidolia, my brain assigning familiar shapes to the paintings, like a Rorschach test. Maybe these were random blobs, and it was just my imagination. I took out another painting. This one was pretty ugly, muddy shades of brown and green around the edges, a big pink blob in the middle. Spring Blooms was the title. I leaned it against pink marble and stepped back, closed my eyes, let out a breath, took off my glasses. I opened my eyes. Oh no. The pinkish blob, now blurred and at a distance, was clearly the shape of a woman's body, laying on the ground, splattered with blood. Why would he paint this? And who would buy this? Who would want a painting of a dead body in their home? I swallowed, my throat dry. I put on my glasses and slid the painting back in, with the others stacked up. Was this the reason Theodore was actually making money? He was selling these paintings to sickos that were camouflaged well enough to stay hung up through dinner parties and visits from the in-laws. I texted the client who was supposed to pick up Midnight Dream and told them I wasn't feeling well. Then I drove home, stomach twisting, and locked myself inside. But I didn't exactly feel safe in the house either, because Theodore had a few of his own paintings hanging on our walls. I realized now, as I viewed them from a distance, that the painting in our living room depicted a close-up of a woman's face, but something black was oozing out of her mouth. Vomit? A spider? Not enough detail to tell, and the huge one in our bedroom, hanging above our bed, looked like two lovers embracing, except they appeared dead from the ashen-gray tint of their bodies. This was sick, and it didn't even make sense. I remembered when Theodore painted this one, the one of the lovers. I had watched him for more than an hour. He was just flinging paint randomly as he listened to the weird chanting music he always played. Yet, the blobby shapes clearly suggested two people embracing. I decided to sleep in the guest room that night, but before I did, I made the mistake of walking into Theodore's home studio. I'd left the lights on somehow, so I stepped into the studio, my heart pounding. It was a lot more cramped than the one downtown, only about 100 square feet, with a huge stack of paintings in the corner. As I reached for the light switch, I noticed the unfinished piece on the easel. I'd seen it several times over the last few weeks, but now I saw it differently. I took off my glasses and took a few steps back, out into the darkened foyer. It was a woman lying on a dark wooden floor, splattered in blood, except that woman was me. Of course, I couldn't be sure. There wasn't enough detail, but from the colors, that looked like my favorite gray sweater, my hair splayed out on the floor. I backed away. Then I ran out of the house. I drove all night until I got to a friend's place. That's where I am now. Theodore has tried to call me, but I've let all his calls go to voicemail. Every time I close my eyes, I see the painting. The splatters of paint that look just like my dead body. Story 5. I work in security at Disney World, the happiest place on Earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online. But I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive and stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I tried to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 o'clock a.m., and the next guest checks in around 3 o'clock p.m., and all of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family: dad, mom, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all of their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now, at Disney, we have something called Magic Bands. Magic Bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass, a system used to bypass lines, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's FastPass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride. It's a Small World, around 11 o'clock a.m. Then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and Mom and Dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride, middle of the damn day, turned off that earworm music, and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album, and I swear there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle. But the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around. So it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10-15 I can see Dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out, but in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see Dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just Mom and 1 kid, another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think them 2 are still alive, just damn near catatonic. Looking straight ahead, pale. And y'all, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures, I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with this family. I can't look anymore or I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. It's the file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there. before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are.